Welcome back, guys. We just got some packages from Street Imports and Yonaka, so shout out to them for once again hooking us up. Oh. Let's take a look at what we got. I see some coilover wrenches. Oh, ooh, ooh. And nuts, and oh my god, I'm just swagged out. Wow, I'm so excited. Ooh, that's a rear. Okay, let's do this. That's happening. Adjustable dampening?
Is it really?
Oh yeah, I think it's like 28 way adjustable too. Tutorial. Wow. It's got all the bushings you need and everything. They're beautiful.
They are. I was gonna say those look nice.
Who are you? Whoa. Ugh.
Those don't swing and swing like mine do.
New insulators. Fully adjustable body rings. Wow. So that's the rears. That's nice. It's gonna look so good. That is stout. Oh my god. Adjustable dampening again. Oh my god, those are beautiful. So we got our front coilovers here, fully adjustable dampening, ride height. Got our rear springs, ride height adjustable. Rear shocks, adjustable dampening of course. Wouldn't have it any other way. Got our supplied nuts for the front coil top hats. Time to grease these up and we're ready to go. And of course, shout out to Yonaka for just sending me all the swag possible. Alright guys, so for these front coilovers, you want to make sure that these top nuts only getting tightened down by hand tools, no impacts. As far as the bottom goes, you do not want to adjust these top two collars. That's going to be actually affecting the spring rate and how it's going to handle. These do come preset from factory. To adjust ride height, you want to adjust this lower collar and this lower body here. Good rule of thumb is you want to have at least 1 inch of threads engaged. So I went ahead and pre-marked that, moved the collar down there. And then if you live in northern climates, very important, you do want to put a whole bunch of NECs on the threads here, just to make sure that this is not going to seize, because once it does, pretty much impossible to unseize. So we're going to get our body thread on here. There is a little tutorial on each of these that you can follow. Pretty straightforward, so we went ahead, lifted the car, ripped some wheels off, and get right into it. So we're going to do the front coilovers first. In order to do the fronts, you're going to have a whole lot of cowling here usually. Mine doesn't have that anymore. I went ahead with these cowl filters. So you should have a cabin air filter that's going to have 6 8mm that you have to remove. You'll pop this cap out. You'll have a single bolt there, and then one on either side of these strut braces. You can use, I believe, an 11mm for these. And that's to gain access to the top nuts up here. As far as underneath, there's a few ways we can tackle this. I am doing new brakes, and it is sometimes easier to get this weight off of the knuckle, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove my caliper and rotor and pads. You're gonna wanna hang your caliper off by the frame somewhere over here. Again, that's not necessary. I am doing front brakes while I'm in here. Other than that, you're gonna have a single bolt coming through here, and that is holding your lower strut body to the knuckle. So not a bad idea now to clean this up and get some penetrating fluid in there, especially if you live where it snows and they put terrible things on the road. Once you get this bottom bolt removed or loosened, you do have to split the rear here so you're able to slide the shock up and out. So once again, penetrating fluid will be your friend. You're gonna have a nut up here that's currently under all this grease from my blown out suspension. You're gonna have a nut here that you remove, and that's gonna be for your sway bar end links, and you just pop those out and then you're pretty much set and ready to go. So we're gonna unbutton this and then we're pretty much there. Again, Make sure you put some NECs on these threads. It's going to make adjustment a whole lot easier. The easy part is installing the coilovers. The difficult part is getting that ride height. Oh, so perfect. So we'll jump into this, start ripping everything apart, and get our coilovers in. Alright guys, so this could take some convincing to get to this point, so I did have to disconnect the ABS and brake wear pad from the frame rail. Everything else just kind of pops off and out of the way. Don't stress your brake line too much. In order to get this to clear your fender, you may have to loosen off the control arm bolts at the bottom. That'll allow you to flex your control arms a little more. Make sure you tighten those up. You will need to get an alignment after coilovers anyway. Down here, to get your actual front strut out, you are going to have to separate this collar. It's definitely not recommended to use a chisel, and you don't want to spread it too much. That's where you're going to want to spray some penetrating fluid to help weasel it out. This is all cast, so it is very brittle and fragile, and it's asking to explode. So there's a special socket you can get, and you twist it with your ratchet and just barely spreads it. I'm using a chisel. Good time to mention you are going to need some new insulator gaskets for the top of your strut. Not the end of the world, but something to keep in mind. There's a left and a right coilover body. You need to make sure that you do put them on the right side, so we're on the driver's side. This is how it's going to sit here. Once again, you do want to put some NECs on all these threads here, especially the bottom ones. When you do install this, this tab is going to end up going into the groove here, and it's not a bad idea to put a little bit of grease or NECs inside of the sleeve. That's pretty much it. So again, make sure that you set these up level and you have the same amount of threads on either side. And then at that point, I'm just going to bolt the top in first, and then I'm able to swing our knuckle up and in to our sleeve here. We have it set up at the highest ride height possible, so if you're going for slammed, it's going to be a lot easier to install. If you are going to be drooping your lower control arm, it's not a bad idea to disconnect your ride height sensor here. And once again, do not stress your brake hose too much here. If you stress this hose a little too much, it will crack, and under heavy braking will explode. You'll have no brakes. Not ideal, so just make sure you have an eye on that. And if you do need to, hang your caliper off to the side. So we're going to go ahead, grease up our threads here, and then we're good to go. So it is a shame to lather this up in a bunch of NECs when it used to look really, really good, and now it just looks really, really dirty. So when we do install these, I am going to take the extra steps to wipe off all the excess NECs off the coils here so it looks a little better. Other than that, I'm going to install the top, remembering to put that insulator on, and then it's going to dangle in there, and then I can sit our little steering knuckle up and slide that into the bottom of the body, making sure that the tab here is facing the rear so we can put our sway bar in it. So let's go ahead and slam that in now. 'Cause I can't see you anywhere. 'Cause I don't wanna know, I swear I should go, I don't wanna let you down. You just wanna know how far I will go, 'cause you know I will stay around. So let me know where to go. So let me know where to go. We're gonna leave the sway bar disconnected for now, just so we can get our ride height set here. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten down these upper nuts, and we're gonna tighten them down more or less as centered as we can in the previous marks of the OEM nuts. That way it's gonna be a little bit easier to align it, and it's gonna be closer in theory. So guys, we got our front end dropped down and sitting right where we want it. I'm pretty happy with that. The only issue we came across is my little strut tower cross braces here that go from the strut tower to the firewall there. Don't actually clear the dampening adjuster knob, so I think quick easy fix is going to be to get a longer bolt and then put a spacer at the bottom. So not the end of the world there, we'll go ahead and do that later. Took it for a quick test drive with just the fronts done, and honestly they're amazing. I love them. So especially going from the worn out suspension we had before, this is it's crazy. It's a monster. I haven't even got to adjusting these yet. I went around the block and up and down a freeway, and it's huge difference. So front's done. Now we gotta go ahead and jump on the rear here, and we're gonna pretty much aim for level. We might drop the rear a ½ inch as well, but pretty straightforward. Let's lift up the rear and do the same thing here. So once again, guys, it is actually pretty straightforward. So we're gonna have our spring that we're replacing here and our shock here. So we're gonna have to undo this bolt down here. You want to make sure you have the jack supporting this lower control arm before you start loosening that. Not a bad idea, again, if you're in the rust belt, to start penetrating fluid on these and let them sit. And then other than that, some key things to keep in mind. We don't want to be stretching any of these brake hoses or ABS lines or brake pad wear sensors, so keep that in mind here as well. And what we're going to do is go ahead and loosen off the bolts up here inside the trunk. And to gain access, we're going to have to remove our inner liner. Just pull a bunch of these tabs out. There's about 4 on each side. And then up here, we're going to have a rubber cap we have to remove as well. And that's going to be the top of our shock. And this is going to be where our dampener adjuster knob is going to poke through here. So pretty straightforward. You are going to have to use a wrench on the bottom, and a socket on the top to stop it from spinning. Pretty straightforward there. Once you remove it up here, we can go down to the bottom and start working the suspension loose. So to get the bottom of your shock out, you're going to have a 16 mil down here, and you're going to want to use some E12s on this. I tried a 10 mil and it went horribly wrong. So E12s for the bottom two here. And then as we come over to this lower control arm, I do have the jack supporting it. I took out this bottom bolt that's 21 mil. It may be necessary to crack this bolt loose here. Now again, this is going to adjust your alignment on the rear, so it's very important that you do get an alignment afterwards, especially if you touch that one. Not a bad idea if you do have some spring compressors to put them on as well, just to keep everything nice and safe and it's not going to surprise you at all. So just keep in mind how this is sitting in here. You want to make sure that's going to go back the right way. We're going to slowly lower the jack down and we'll be able to pop the spring right on out. So again, maybe necessary to loosen that so you can pivot your control arm a little more. Shouldn't fight us too much, so I don't think we're going to have too much of an issue here then. Went ahead, we removed the spring assembly as well as the shock. All right, so you can see here, this is the original shock and spring before, and these are what we're putting in. So the height adjustment on the spring is going to be on the bottom here. For the top rubber insulator, we're going to have to reuse the cap from the existing OEM springs. So we'll have to put some grease in there and make sure that seats properly. When you install it in the vehicle, you want to make sure that the spring is actually butting up here and sitting flush. For the shocks, we are going to have to reuse this bottom shock mount, so it's not a bad idea to get new ones. I absolutely didn't, so I would recommend getting new ones. Both the shock and the spring do have ride height adjustments here, so you're going to want to adjust them equal amounts. So if you're going to drop it an inch, you want to lower them both the same amount. And again, we're going to have to put a lot of anti-seize on these threads so they do not seize up in the winter. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. We swap that on, put this onto the spring. Make sure it's all sitting happy. For the lower control arm, we are going to have to remove this spring insulator. I just get a pry bar in here and pry it out. Once we remove that, we'll be able to adjust our ride height on the spring seat here. And this will just swap and drop right in there. So that'll be the bottom. Then we'll be able to sit the spring in, use the jack and lift the control arm, drop the shock in, and we are pretty much set. So let's get to her.
I got no choice, choice, and I'm here. I got no choice, no choice, no choice, and I'm here. And I'm
Alright, so we went ahead, we got our caps back on inside the trunk, so we're ready to put our liners back. As far as the rear goes, we have our boots on in place. We have everything lathered in a generous amount of anti-seize. Everything's buttoned up at the bottom here. We're gonna have our metal spring cap, our rubber insulator, spring, and then the adjustments here at the bottom. We have our ride height set and everything again, slathered in a generous amount of anti-seize. So everything's now ready to go back together. We did torque everything down. You want to make sure that you go back, once you have your ride height set, tighten down these collars, go back and retorque all your bolts that you touched after driving it for some time, and you're gonna have to retorque all your wheels. Then again, just make sure that you do go get an alignment after, because doing these coilovers is gonna do some sort of awful for your alignment. So pretty straightforward, guys. That's pretty much it. Throw some wheels on, drop her down, and see how she looks. How's it going, everybody? So it is the next day. Just went and got a coffee, taking the car for a drive, and honestly, I love these coilovers, so I strongly recommend them. Like, not only did I go from arguably the worst, most blown out suspension in the world to coilovers, but with the adjustable dampening, it's been a fun morning of tuning. So honestly, I love these things so much. I'll post a review in a couple months or like a year or something on how they're still performing, but if they're anything like the ones I just put on my Civic last year, I'm gonna love them. These things are fantastic. So shout out to Street Imports. Thank you again, Yonaka. These coilovers are great. I love them. Hope this helped you guys out, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.